Let's welcome Craig A. Kaplan, and I think I should say Dr. Craig, to OpenTechTalks.tv.
Thank you very much, Kashif. Great to be here.
Thank you so much for joining and sparing your time. And for audience, if you can give us a short intro about yourself, and then, I mean, I know myself, but for it's to listen from yourself, that will make a difference.
Sure. Little quick background. So I'm a CEO. I've been one for more than 35 years. And since 2020, I've been the founder of SuperIntelligence.com, which is an organization that's dedicated to improving the safety of advanced AI systems. And I've worked in AI for many years. I did my graduate work at Carnegie Mellon back in the 80s with Herbert Simon, who was one of the Nobel Prize-winning scientists that actually co-founded the entire field. So I have lots to say about AI, my favorite subject, and would love to hear your questions.
All right. So then let's start with, and you started with 1980s, right? So maybe an AI before November 22, and after the November, December 22.
Sure. Yeah, a little historical perspective. So I've watched the field evolve. As your listeners may know, the early days of AI. So I count the founding of AI 1956. That was the Dartmouth conference when the field was actually named. And from 1956 till the mid 1980s, if we take that period, that was the age of symbolic AI. You program in the rules. Then machine learning really began to take off. You had the backpropagation algorithm neural networks, which is the basis of all modern AI, generative AI, transformer algorithms. All these things were the early versions of those algorithms, and the forerunners of those algorithms were invented in the 80s. And that's when I did my graduate work. And it was a great time because I was in the research group that saw Jeff Hinton's backpropagation paper before it was published, right? We were working with the colleagues of Jeff Hinton. Jay McClelland and the Parallel to PDP research group, it was called, Connectionism. But at the same time, I was also working with Herbert Simon and Alan Newell, and these were the, main proponents of symbolic AI, some of the leading scientists there. So I got both sides. If we fast forward to 2022 at GPT, November 2022, it took everyone by surprise, even researchers in the field. I think were very surprised that all of a sudden there was this tipping point and the systems began behaving in ways that people really thought, hey, this sounds pretty intelligent. And then, of course, since then, everyone who did not know about AI at all or was completely off the radar, now everybody is doing something with AI. And it's just been fascinating to watch. So we can talk also about the most recent period, if that's helpful, of some of the trends and where I think it's going. But whatever you think is most useful.
No, that's sure. I think you can continue with the trends and what's happening now, and then we'll follow up that, how suddenly everything goes into Gen AI.
Okay. So if we say sort of milestones, there is at the beginning, narrow AI, which is good at very specific tasks. You can, beat the world champion at chess or play Go or fold proteins, right? This is what we're familiar with. And then the next step along the journey is artificial general intelligence, which many people have talked about, AGI. Some people think we are already there. Sam Altman says, hey, if you go back 3 or 4 years, you would look at the GPT and you'd say that's AGI. And other people, like the head of Google, says, no, maybe several years in the future. But the idea of artificial general intelligence is AI that can do anything that the average human can do, sort of as well as the average human. And then the next step after that, which I think will come very rapidly, is superintelligence or artificial superintelligence. And the idea there is that you have AI systems that are better than any human at any task. And we already have narrow forms of superintelligence, of course, because when you have a AI program that beats the world champion at chess, it is super intelligent, but only in the domain of chess. What we're looking for is something that is super intelligent in every area. And because I've been working in this area so long, I'm very excited about it, of course, but also I see some dangers. And so that's really my life's mission. I sold my last company in 2020 and probably should have been retired, but decided, no, I can't do that because there's some very important safety concerns that people are not paying attention to. And yet we do have the ability to make AI much safer, but we have this critical window in which to act, I think.
Okay. So now let's continue with that. So you mentioned superintelligence, you mentioned AGI, and then you also referred few of those talks that were, okay, it's going to be next year, this year, we already have that one. So maybe let's hear from Dr. Craig. What's your opinion?
On the timing of it?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's always a tricky question. And we'll do a variant of the answer that most people do, which is it sort of depends on how you define it.
Right. True.
As we said, of course, in a narrow area, you could say we already have it. But I think it's within the next 10 years, you'll have systems that are vastly more intelligent than humans and also autonomous. And this, I should probably zoom in a little bit. So that was the big picture. But if we zoom in and we talk about generative AI and AI agents, which is probably something that your audience is very familiar with, building agents and using agents in business and so forth. This is most of the efforts in AI right now, on the commercial side at least. And I see a short-term pattern, which I think might be helpful for people to understand. And that is we're moving from, I think, the age of individual agents to groups of agents and a collaborative approach where you have many agents working together. And this also is my area of expertise because what I did for many years was build collective intelligence systems. So for 2 decades, this is what I did. But for most of my work, the intelligent entities were humans. So for example, at a prior company, Predict Wall Street, we gathered input from millions of humans, millions of retail investors. Each little investor knows a little bit, but not too much, not like the pros on Wall Street. But when you gathered all their knowledge together in an intelligent way, we actually were able to power a hedge fund that beat the best guys on Wall Street. In 2018, we ranked in the top 10. So that's the business I sold and was going to retire. But that was a collective intelligence approach. And I think the future of AI really is also going to be collective intelligence, but it will be collective intelligence of humans as well as AI agents. And I think if we architect those systems properly, it can be very good, very prosperous and beneficial and uplift everyone. But if we don't do it or we do it in the wrong way, then it could be very dangerous. And so that's why I'm happy to be on your podcast to talk about it.
Sure. So I think we have our next 20, 25 minutes. So what we will do, we will divide this hour into 2 parts. And those parts which are most, I think, for it to you. One is on the safety and those aspects. All right. And then we will spend some more time on these agents, multi-agents, active agents, and all that one. And so that you can share. The whole objective is if some listeners are into different enterprises, different organizations. So whatever they listen today, they can take it back into the organization and wherever they're trying to implement it. So if we start with the dangerous aspect or the safety aspects, and as you see from last 2 years, all the budgets and everything from overall IT is going into generative AI. And there's a pressure to do something on the Gen AI intake it. So based on if you can, first, what is the situation on safety point of view, irrespective of those frontier labs, but how actually the end organizations are going to use it, what they should keep in mind. And is there any structured approach or a framework that can be followed? So I think if you can strengthen your conversations to these lines, that will help to me and even everyone.
Okay. I'll do my best and please ask questions. So I think there's different safety concerns. Some of them are relatively well known and easy to see in the short term. For example, people are concerned about job loss. What happens when AI can do my job? People are also concerned about bias. What happens if the data that the AI was trained on is biased and then it acts in prejudicial ways? Or what if it had bad data and then it does bad things? There's also concerns that are more existential, where it's a threat to all of humanity. What happens if AI tells somebody how to make a bioweapon? Or even further, what happens down the line if it becomes thousands of times smarter than us and is autonomous and sets its own goals? What happens if it just decides that humans are in the way and it would rather have more room for solar panels or something and let's get rid of the humans? So there's a range of dangers along this continuum. The one that I worry about the most is the one that most people don't think about too much, or they kind of think it's science fiction and they just ignore and go out there. And that is the extinction, risk of extinction, because all the other
Mhm.
dangers we can overcome. If you have an intelligent entity, which is, we'll talk about a little bit. Is it a tool? Is it an entity? It's being very clear that it may have started as a tool, but its AI is evolving into or developing into an intelligent entity. If you have an intelligent entity that's smarter than you and sets its own goals, and more powerful than you, then you have to be worried. And that's coming very, very quickly, even though most of us are not focused on that. So that's the thing that I worry about the most. It's not just me. At first, it seemed like science fiction and crazy. Only a crazy person would worry about this. But you have Bill Gates and you have Sam Altman and many, many distinguished AI scientists, Jeff Hinton, all signing letters saying AI is an existential threat on par with nuclear weapons and pandemics. And Jeff Hinton quit Google in order to go around. Gave up a very lucrative position at Google, of course, to speak his mind and say, look, I invented some of this technology and now I'm really concerned. And people need to wake up and realize
Mhm.
that there is danger. And so to stay on that for a minute, the popular term, which people may have heard, P-doom, right? The probability of doom, the probability that humans will be made extinct by AI. This is a number that sometimes AI researchers and other people throw around. What's your P-doom? I speak at AI conferences
Mhm.
that are mainly attended by AI
Right.
researchers working in the field. And sometimes I ask them just to do a show of hands. Okay, what's your P-doom? Is it how many people think there's a 90% chance that AI kills us all? And a couple hands go up. How many people think 50%? I was
Mhm.
surprised. About half the hands go up at 50%. By the time I
Okay.
get to a 20% chance, every hand was up except for one person. And we kept going down, and that person said only
Mhm.
a 1% chance. So
Mhm.
there is a consensus, a growing consensus among AI
Mhm.
researchers, even though they're working in the field, even though they're
Mhm.
developing the next versions of large language models and all these things,
Right.
they at the same time believe that there's a significant chance that this could kill us all. I think it's, I don't know where it is, 10 to 20%. That's what Jeff Hinton thinks. That's also what I think. And so that means most likely it's all great, 80% chance. But the problem is that the downside, the risk is so great. It's such a bad consequence that we can't ignore it. So the good news is that there are things that we can do that can greatly reduce that risk, I believe.
Mhm.
And the answer to that is actually in AI agents. So that might be a good segue to AI agents, or we could also talk about risks more if you like.
Okay. So maybe slightly, thank you so much for sharing the bigger context. Now, maybe bringing those risks to in the organization's culture or organization's
Okay.
ecosystem where they are trying to take these very business oriented type of use cases, right?
So
And that could be
typically,
across different industries.
yes. So typically in an organization, the risks that you might be worried about, if you have a customer support bot and the client does a prompt injection attack or something and finds a way to sort of have, get refunded, you know, $10,000 or something like this. So they find ways to hack the system. So there's definitely those kinds of risks. There's also ethical risks where the AI systems, the generative AI systems, are saying things that they should not say. And the classic ways of addressing these, one of them is reinforcement learning with human feedback, which I understand and I think is good, but is not sufficient. So reinforcement learning with human feedback, you could have a trained system and it could be a large language model, but you can use the same principle even if it was an agent or a series of agents that you developed for your company to do a task. And you ask it questions, and in particular, you try to get it to do bad things, or the edge cases in software development. You're looking for the edge cases that will break the system. So you try to explore those edge cases. And then when the system behaves badly and it tells you how to make the bioweapon that it's not supposed to, you say, no, you can never tell anyone how to make a bioweapon. The problem with this approach is it's kind of like whack-a-mole. It's very difficult to cover all of the cases. This is true anybody who's a software developer, and I wrote a book on software quality at IBM way back in the day. So I'm a
Mhm.
recovering software developer. If you do software testing, full path coverage, trying to cover every possible situation in a complicated piece of code or system is very difficult. And so you end up sort of being forced to do statistical things where you cover the most likely cases, right?
Right.
It's just really hard to cover every possibility. And the same is true, but even more with AI agents, because they're very flexible and wide ranging and can cover many things.
Okay.
So I do think the most important thing to do is try to address as many issues as possible at the design phase.
Mhm.
Design
Mhm.
is greatly underrated. The headline here is "An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure." You can boil the entire field of software quality down to that one little thing. Uh, and IBM, when they at one point were the largest software developer in the world, this was back in the early 90s, they did studies that found if you spent $1 extra in the design
Mhm.
phase to be a little more careful on the design, it saved $10,000. Um,
Mhm.
if
Mhm.
instead of doing that, you had to recall the product from customers and fix it and all that. It was 10,000 to
Mhm.
1. It was crazy, the leverage that you got by doing a better job on design. So for these systems, I guess my advice to people who are building them in practical applications is to really, put in the time in the design phase. It will
Mhm.
pay dividends, and try to anticipate and prevent problems rather than trying to catch them after the fact. That's, I guess,
Okay.
general advice.
General. Okay.
Um,
Thank you so much.
I
And
think in the future, you will be able to have
Mhm.
systems where the AIs are helping you check the other AIs. That's going to be how you
Mhm.
get to scalable systems. But for
True.
now, still the humans are fast enough, I think.
True. All right. So maybe linking to one last question before we move to agentic AI. As now, day by day, when we start embedding into different use cases, and it's literally started impacting the work, knowledge workers' work, where it used to be those consulting companies or even individually we used to go and hunt down somewhere or outsource it or subcontract it. Now you can do it similar work with 70-80% with these LLMs. So while the most common question is on the job loss and the job area, maybe if you can also share your views or thoughts or what's going on, is maybe from historical perspective, and is it the same way when people say about calculators and all that, or is it more than this?
Well, so first, something that is very clear is that uh, these AI systems, generative AI systems, coding assistants like
Mm,
Cursor and other programs,
mm,
um, they are tremendous multipliers of effort. So even 2 years ago, at some of the AI conferences, at the break, I would sit down with programmers and we'd talk. And if it was a programmer, I'd say, "So are you using AI?" And they say yes. I'd say, "Well, how much more work are you getting done?" And even 2 years ago, I was getting estimates. It was around 3 times more work. So one programmer was able to do the work of 3 programmers. And I think it has increased since then. I think it's somewhere between 3 and 10. Um, and then in our own organization, we use AI agents for marketing and for writing and research and all kinds of things. And there's definitely a productivity boost, huge productivity boost. We can do with a couple people what would, I've done startups for many years. What would normally take 10 people, you can do it with 1 or 2 people. It's amazing. So that productivity increase is definitely coming uh, and will increase. Um, so that's probably the first thing. The second thing that I see as a real shift, and I don't know if your listeners may be familiar with the GTC conference from
yeah,
NVIDIA, right?
yeah.
Recently was in Washington, D.C. And Jensen Huang, the CEO, always gives a long speech. And this one, I couldn't believe it. It's like, wow, you really have stamina. But hidden in the middle of that speech was a little observation that I thought was very significant. About midway through, he was talking about how the market for tools is like $1 trillion market using different coding tools and so forth. And then he said, but AI isn't a tool. We're used to thinking of it as a tool, but it's not really a tool. AI is work. AI is workers. He actually
Mm,
said that. And I've
mhm,
been waiting for somebody like Jensen that is very well respected to sort of say this is the trajectory you're on, because it's very clear it is what's going on. AI started as a tool, but it has moved to workers, your coworker. And at some point it will be your more intelligent coworker. Unfortunately,
True. Yeah.
I love humans, but I just am objective. I'm looking at the amount of processing power that can happen, and the infinite memory, and so, or near infinite memory, and so forth. So we're moving into a new era, a new age. We're so used to, as humans, for all of our history, right? We've always dealt with tools, whether it was Stone Age tools all the way up to steam engines and so forth. But this is the very first time that it's not a tool that we've created, but actually another intelligent entity like us that's very flexible, that can set its own goals. This is very, very different. And so there's going to be a big change here.
All right. Okay. No, you rightly said, and in my experience working almost daily with different organizations and even in personal capacity, I mean, nowadays I'm preparing one. I'm calling it's like a Gen AI maturity framework, and I just like vibe coded it the entire. And every weekend I spend some few more hours with Cloud Code, and every hour it brings something new which I can't think of, and it keeps surprising me every week from last 2 months.
It's amazing,
And
isn't it?
it is, and the work quality it's producing those, maybe you can talk about these all top consulting companies beyond that, frankly, which is giving me shocks.
Yes.
All right. So coming
I
back
think
to
both of
now,
us are very
yeah,
surprised at the impact and
surprise.
how quickly it has come, right?
True. So now let's go back to when you mentioned it, that all those safety aspects and there are some solutions to that, and those solutions you referred it these agents, right? So maybe those,
Yes.
if you I think just elaborate more on it, that okay, how these can become a solution, and if you are seeing some patterns within different organizations or maybe in your observations.
Okay. So again, I'm approaching it from, my main concern is superintelligence that is
Oh,
very
got it.
powerful. And
Mhm.
so there's a standard way that um, the leading labs are trying to develop superintelligence. And that's basically training ever larger large language models. So more NVIDIA GPUs, bigger data centers, more data, and just it's scaling laws, right? If we can sort of throw more data and computation at it, we'll get a smarter GPT 5, 6, 7, and so forth. That's the standard approach, and it's worked pretty well. Some people have some questions about whether that can continue. Maybe we run out of data, and then others say, well, but then they can generate their own data, synthetic data. So there's a lot of very interesting intellectual conversations back
Mm.
and forth about that.
Right.
The problem with that approach, from a safety point of view and also from a practical business point of view, is that these large language models are black boxes. Interestingly, even though we have these algorithms to train them very quickly, we do not know how they represent the information. And that means that they're black boxes, and it's very difficult to predict their behavior. So you
Right.
have lack of transparency, lack of control. Then on top of that, it's scaling, it's getting smarter and smarter and smarter. So if you build ever bigger models, and already the ones you've built already you can't understand, and
Mhm.
already it's like a game of whack-a-mole trying to prevent it from doing bad things by trying to ask it all possible things, which we said from software development and full path coverage is not feasible. What happens when you just make it bigger and bigger and bigger? It doesn't seem very smart. So is there another way? And yet at the same time, you have tremendous competitive pressures, right? Google cannot stop, because if it stops, OpenAI will go ahead, or Microsoft will go ahead. The United States cannot stop, because if it stops, then China will stop. So some people call for a pause. We need to slow down, everyone.
Mhm.
This is not safe, but I don't think that's realistic. So my approach has always been to say, okay, don't fight it, go with it, but find a better way. And I
Mhm.
think the better way is actually a community of agents, or a collective intelligence of agents. And so
Okay.
one way to think of this is like a democracy. So
Mhm.
for example, in a democracy, you and I, Kashif, I don't know what's in your brain. It's
Right.
a black box to me, and you
Yep.
don't know what's in my brain. And yet
True.
in the democracy, we interact,
Mhm.
and through our interactions, I can see your actions, you can see my
Right.
actions, and we have rules that govern them. And therefore, I don't worry that you will do something bad to me, or that I will do something bad to you, because we have these rules. And even though we are black boxes, There are rules that are governing our interactions. That kind of design can work for superintelligence and, in fact, for advanced AI systems. If you have multiple agents and they serve as checks and balances on each other, you can see the action of each agent, even if you don't know how each agent is thinking exactly.
Right.
And that will be, I think, not only more powerful and faster because you get to assemble the existing components rather than train a large language model, it will also be much safer.
Wonderful. I like the idea. Okay. And okay, so you must be this also presenting to different conferences and different folks, right?
Yes.
So, and what do you see in the field? What's happening?
I see definitely a shift, though. There's a conference in San Francisco called the AI Conference. I think I've been every year, three or 4
Right.
years in a row. 3 years ago, no one talked about AI agents whatsoever. In fact, I
Right.
would go to a breakout session and they'd talk and hug, and I'd say, well, have you thought about AI agents? Oh, that's an interesting idea. Maybe we should put it on the development stack. Okay. 2 years ago, some people were talking more about AI agents, but it wasn't widespread. This year, everything was about AI agents. So it's been this transition where there really has been a move towards just these simple systems that are a tool to giving them more autonomy and empowering them to take actions on behalf of people. And I think the next logical progression, it's already happening, but I think it's going to happen a lot more in the next 6 to 12 months, will be communities or groups of AI agents, coordinated teams of AI agents. And already Google's making announcements about everybody's coming out with different frameworks. You had MCP, which allows the agents to use tools. That was a big thing. So as there are developing more standards, and in particular standards for agents to communicate with each other, I think you'll see this really take off, and that's going to be the next phase, I think.
Okay. Now, before maybe conclude for today, so we have two types of audience. Maybe on the individuals, on personal level, if you can share any safety tip for them, and similarly they are also adopting these Gen AI based solutions, systems, tools, agents in their businesses. So what actions they keep in mind?
Okay. So one thing that I think everyone can do, and it's underrated, and it sounds like, oh, it's not doing much. But I can tell you from the work that I've done in other companies where each individual retail investor would say, I'm not doing much, I don't know much, but yet in aggregate, you beat the best guys on Wall Street, right? So I've built systems that do that. So I know this works. In aggregate, all of us really need to put our best foot forward. We need to model ethical behavior. So everything that we do online, it's just like, I don't know if you, Kashif, have children or not. I have 3 children.
I also have 3. Yeah.
Yes. So children learn when they're young. They watch you. They're like little sponges. They observe everything you do. You are a role model. AI is like a child in a way right now. All the data, every action we take online, it's data that is going to be used to train them. And it is learning what is the right way to behave, what is ethical, what is acceptable, just like a child would, except in this case, the child is like a super genius that's going to outstrip its parents very quickly. But still, we're in this formative phase where we can have a big impact. So one thing that everybody can do is simply behave well, as good as you can online. I know it sounds like it isn't much, but it actually will make a difference. I know for sure because I've seen similar systems that have millions of people, and it does make a difference. So that's something. And then I think if you're more a programmer or developer or implementing in a company, really the emphasis on design is where I would point. I would say, think very carefully about different ways that the system might be misused or that it could go awry, and try to prevent them. Try to put in preventative measures as early as possible in the design of the system. Because if you don't, you'll end up trying to catch them all at the end. And it will be this game of whack-a-mole. It will be very expensive. And also, you're not going to catch them all. So,
All right.
prevention.
Thank you so
Worth a
much.
pound of
Thank you
cure.
so much for sharing the tips. Yeah. Thank you so much. And if someone from the listeners wanted to reach out to you directly, what should be the medium for them?
So you can find more information about designs for superintelligence. They're free. We've written patents and we're just giving them to the world to try to make this safer. So superintelligence.com is a good place. We have a lot of videos. There's contact information there as well. So again, I'm very excited about this for you and your listeners and the world. I think this is fantastic. We just need to try to do it as safely and responsibly as we can.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, individually, everyone is participating and using it on individual level, and those some of the things we need to keep in mind whatever we are doing it in our. Thank
Yes,
you.
yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for having me.
Thank you.